Hello there and welcome to World News program coming to you live on All 24 News. Let's have a look at the headlines first. This year's Nobel Peace Prize is presented to Belarusian, Russian and Ukrainian activists who promoted the right to criticize power and protect citizens' fundamental rights. Also in our news, Ukraine says the situation on the front line is difficult as forces are still fighting against Russia. German authorities say they ended a suspected hostage taken in the eastern city of Dresden. Plus, China says COVID-19 infection cases dropped to 13,000 after easing of restrictions. Hello again, I'm Karim Fazakri. Welcome to the program. First in our news, Algeria commemorates the 62nd anniversary of the 11th of December demonstrations in 1962. The demonstrations were a key factor during the course of the Algerian Revolution, where Algerian people totally denied without appeal any option other than the complete independence and sovereignty of Algeria. On this occasion, Algerian President Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune sent a letter on the eve of the commemoration. In his letter, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune stated that Algeria's immortal days were reminiscent of the struggles of generations and the struggle of the Algerian people in the face of the sinister colonialism of many cities across the homeland. To a different story now, China seeks to strengthen its economic ties with Algeria and expands it to include various fields. Hence, profitability for both sides will be achieved through direct Chinese investment and raise in the volume of trade exchanges in the coming years. Zahra Farjani has the details.
China aims at expanding its economic relations with Algeria, and in order to raise profitability, the country has increased its direct investment with Algeria as well as the volume of important commercial exchanges.
ترتبط الجزائر والصين بعلاقات تاريخية واستراتيجية.
Algeria and China are linked through historical and strategic relations extending to the Algerian Liberation Revolution. China was the first non-Arab country to recognize the provisional government in 1958. Both countries also share the same visions towards issues of common interests. Algeria and China share a firm support concerning the fundamental interests of both countries.
Beijing seeks a strategic partnership with Algiers to include new areas to the existing cooperation in the sectors of infrastructure, energy and mines. The volume of direct Chinese investments in Algeria reached $10 billion, while the volume of trade exchange reached $9 billion. As for the most important Chinese investment in Algeria, it invests $7 billion in the phosphate sector to produce 5.4 tons of agricultural fertilizers, as well as the investment of 3 Chinese companies in the Rajbilet mine project to extract iron ore at a value of $2 billion in a first stage, in addition to Shershel port project that's worth $6 billion. China has shown unconditional support for Algeria's entry into the BRICS bloc that brings together the countries with the fastest growing economy, which are Brazil, Russia, China, India and South Africa. The two sides also seek to accelerate negotiations to complete the line of strategic cooperation, taking into consideration that Algeria is an important corridor for the Chinese Belt Line, a backup for the Silk Road towards Europe, and a maritime and land outlet for the transportation of Chinese goods to the African continent.
Still in cooperation file, Algerian Foreign Affairs Minister Mr. Mtala Mamra held talks with his Turkish counterpart Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, who is on a working visit to Algeria. The two ministers chaired the proceedings of the first session of the Joint Planning Committee in the presence of delegations from both countries. The session discussed an in-depth study of the reality of bilateral cooperation in various fields of endeavor, and this comes in implementation of the outputs of the visit of Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune to Turkey last May, and the agreement to achieve the objectives of the strategic partnership between Algeria and Turkey, and to consolidate rapprochement between them on issues of common concern at the regional and international levels.
This is the first session of the Committee of Planification and Partnership between Algeria and Turkey, and it's a special committee which was the result of the summit that gathered the High Council of Algeria and Turkey. It coincided with the visit of the Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune to Turkey. As stated by my brother Lamamra, this is the meeting of the Committee of Planification and Partnership between the two countries after holding the first meeting of High-Ranking Council in Ankara last May. Starting from these meetings that we formed this committee to follow the decisions and developments which occur in our two countries.
It's been 6 months since Algeria suspended the work and friendship treaty with Spain in reactions to Madrid's change of its historical position on the issue of Western Sahara. The kingdom has been counting its financial losses estimated at 500 billion euros in a period not exceeding 4 months. These losses increased the troubles of the Spanish economy amidst the rise in energy prices and the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister and President Vladimir Putin's special representative to the Middle East, Mikhail Bogdanov, met Thursday with a Sahrawi delegation that includes the official of the Secretariat of the Political Organization of the Polisario Front, Katri Adu, and its representative to the United Nations and coordinator with MINURSO, Sidi Mohammed Amar. The meeting that took place at the headquarters of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Moscow comes as part of a continuous communication between the Russian and the Sahrawi side, and has allowed the two parties to discuss several issues, including the status and prospects of the peace process sponsored by the United Nations in Western Sahara. The Moroccan Association for Human Rights has accused the Moroccan regime of causing serious violations against human rights, including restrictions on freedom of expression, press, political and trade union action, calling on it to carry out urgent reforms and stop its ignoring approach to tensions and social problems. Meanwhile, a number of prisoners of conscience launched a hunger strike to denounce the disastrous human rights situation in Morocco. The head of the General Labor Union in Tunisia, Noureddin Taboubi, revealed that a meeting will bring together representatives of the union and a delegation from Najla Boudin's government at the end of the week to discuss controversial issues, including the new finance law. Boudin's government renewed its commitment to dialogue with the social partners for the success of the economic reform plan approved by the Tunisian authorities.
In Hammamet, we will have 3 days of discussion on this 1988 law. We invited the Prime Minister, and according to her advisor, there is a government delegation coming to discuss in open negotiations.
To Germany now, Dresden police started a rescue operation of the hostages of the shopping mall at Market Gallery in the historic city center near the famous Schnitzel market, that is Christmas market on Sunday. Police officials reported that a woman was found dead inside without giving further details, while the suspected of hostages taken, who is in his 40s, died due to injuries. Meanwhile, there were 2 hostages inside the mall before police launched the operation, which pushed operators to evacuate people from the center to reduce the danger.
This morning there was a hostage situation in downtown Dresden. 40-year-old men from Dresden took 2 people hostages, a woman and a child. In the end, special forces seized the hostages. The 2 hostages were taken into custody. They are unharmed and safe and are now being looked after. The perpetrators suffered at least injuries and the situation is now more or less under control, and there is no longer any acute danger in Dresden.
Still in Europe, leaders of several Mediterranean and southern European countries have called on Brussels to come up with a more flexible gas price cap mechanism than the recently proposed cap of €220 per megawatt hour. The call made at an EU Med9 summit in Spain further highlighted divisions within the EU over the proposed cap. The bloc initially proposed a cap of €275 last month, but this was met with considerable opposition. Several EU members want no price cap at all. Human rights activists from Russia, Ukraine and Belarus received their prizes during a ceremony in the Norwegian capital Oslo. The Triple Peace Prize winners were hailed as champions of peace, and they were honored for their many years of work criticizing those in power and defending essential civil rights.
We meet today to celebrate all the Nobel Prizes. We meet at a time when democracy and freedom are in decline globally, and when there is a brutal war of aggression in Europe with disruptive global effects.
To the Russia-Ukraine file now. In his daily address on social media, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky warned that the situation in key areas of the Donbas front in eastern Ukraine remains very difficult. But Kiev's forces are repelling Russian attacks and inflicting significant losses. Zelensky stated that Russian forces had destroyed the city of Bakhmut, one of the epicenters of recent fighting.
The front-line situation remains very difficult in the key areas of Donbas, Bakhmut, Soledar, Mariinka and Kreminna. The terrain in these areas has long been devoid of any unscathed spots, which would not be damaged by shells and fire. The occupiers have practically destroyed Bakhmut, another Donbas city, which the Russian army turned into burnt ruins. I thank all our heroes, old soldiers, commanders who hold the front in these areas, repel attacks and inflict notable losses on the enemy in response to the hell that has entered Ukraine under the Russian flag.
According to a UN spokesman, Belarus informed the organization on Friday that it would allow the transit of grain from Ukraine through its territory without conditions in order for it to be exported from Lithuanian ports. Belarus said in June that it would allow Ukrainian grain to pass through it on its way to Baltic seaports in exchange for Belarus being allowed to ship its own goods out of the ports. Ukraine, however, rejected the suggestion. And after long negotiations between the Russian Federation and the United States, a prisoner swap has been agreed. The swap concerned the Russian businessman Viktor But, who has been in U.S. custody since 2008, and the basketball star Griner Brittany. The details with Usama Ayati.
A prisoner swap between the United States and the Russian Federation resulted in releasing 2 prisoners. This concerns the American basketball star Brittany Griner and the former Russian businessman Viktor But. The swap involved 2 private planes bringing But and Griner to Abu Dhabi Airport from Moscow and Washington before flying them home.
This was not a choice of which American to bring home. The choice was one or none. I wholeheartedly wish that we could have brought Paul home today on the same plane as Brittany, just as at the time I wish we could have brought Brittany and Paul home when we secured the release of Trevor Reed back in April.
Russian businessman But ended up in Washington's custody back in 2008. He was arrested in Thailand after a sting operation run by U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. But was subsequently extradited to the U.S. and sentenced to 25 years in 2012 after being convicted on gun-running charges. But has consistently denied any wrongdoing.
In the middle of the night, they simply woke me up and they said, "Get your things together," and that was it. There was no preliminary information.
Grinner, a 32-year-old star of Women's National Basketball Association's Phoenix Mercury, was arrested on February 17th. Talks to secure her release were complicated by Russia's special military operation in Ukraine and the subsequent deep souring of ties between Washington and Moscow.
My parents taught me two important things. One, take ownership for your responsibilities, and two, to work hard for everything that you have.
The Kremlin said that the prisoner exchange deal to swap prisoners should not be seen as a step towards improving bilateral relations between Moscow and Washington. However, Russian President Vladimir Putin affirmed the possibility of a further prisoner swap in the future.
The Federal Security Service have led on this topic. The FSB made the initial arrangements, led the talks, and reached the results you've just found out about. Contact continues, and they never stop on the Special Services line. Everything is possible. This is the result of negotiations in search of a compromise. In this case, compromises were found, and we are not against continuing this work in the future.
The arrangements came together within the past 48 hours after Biden had made the decision to exchange Bout. A conditional grant to clemency for Bout was not completed until Thursday, after U.S. officials in the UAE verified Grinner had arrived there.
Russia's United Nations Ambassador Vasilina Bensia said that the military aid delivered to Ukraine from the West, threatens European and global security, and that's by ending these military equipment up in the criminal hands and terrorists. Russia also accused Ukraine's military officials by plotting to divert some of the weapons to the black market. U.S. President Joe Biden will back a permanent spot for the African Union in the group of 20 major economies seeking to elevate the continent's role. That's what came in the statement of the White House. And Biden will make the announcement during a 3-day U.S.-Africa summit that opens on Tuesday in Washington, D.C., where the United States will commit to the continent after inroads by China and Russia.
It's past time Africa has permanent seats at the table in international organizations and initiatives. We need more African voices in international conversations that concern the global economy, democracy and governance, climate change, health and security.
To Latin America now, the Peruvian President Dina Boluarte, the first woman to gain power in Peru, named her cabinet following the indictment of Pedro Castillo, amid calls of his supporters to liberate him and plan early elections. Islam said has more.
Peruvian President Dina Boluarte named her cabinet on Saturday. She took office on Wednesday after Castillo was ousted from office and arrested, following his failed attempt to dissolve Congress, as lawmakers were preparing to impeach him. Boluarte is expected to hold the post until 2026, if no snap elections are called.
If society and the situation warrant bringing forward elections, then in conversation with the democratic and political forces in Congress, we will sit down to talk. As soon as the new cabinet swears in and each minister takes office, I will have some time to visit the ex-president Pedro Castillo in prison.
Discontent has been growing in the streets of Peru, as many Peruvians took the streets of Lima to protest against the new president and called for Pedro Castillo's release. Even some politicians have already called for early elections.
We are looking at the situation in Lima and what is happening. We see that Dina is boasting, giving herself a pleasure of being president. She's not the president. We will never accept her.
We need to go out to the streets. There is no other option. This abuse from Congress can go on. They've beaten us, the Peruvian people. They mocked our popular vote. And this is why, comrades, Peruvian people, I call you to the streets. Take the streets and don't allow to be governed by this mafia Congress, this corrupt Congress, a narco attorney, a corrupt judiciary.
The new president called for calm after the violent protests, saying that she was just fulfilling her constitutional role.
I want to call to the brothers and sisters who are protesting, probably with or without reason. I want to call them from here. Let's calm down. I haven't caused this situation. I believe that if Dina Boluarte is taking this responsibility in this political crisis, it is because I'm just fulfilling my constitutional role.
After he failed to dissolve parliament and establish a state of emergency, Pedro Castillo was placed in a pre-trial detention on Thursday for 7 days on allegations by the prosecutor's office, who's suing him for rebellion and conspiracy. Dina Boluarte was Castillo's vice president, and she replaced him and became the first woman to take office as president of Peru.
To Bangladesh now, tens of thousands of opposition supporters rallied in Bangladesh's capital on Saturday to demand the government of the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina resign and install a caretaker before next general elections, expected to be held in early 2024.
Everyone has the right to speak in an independent country. A gathering can be arranged anywhere. If the ruling party Awami League can make a gathering, so can Bangladesh Nationalist Party.
China said on Saturday COVID-19 infection cases dropped to 13,000 after restrictions eased. The country announced it would stop checking truck drivers and ship crew transporting goods domestically for COVID-19, removing a key bottleneck from its supply chain network as dismantling of the country's zero-COVID policy gathers speed. The country this week made a dramatic pivot toward economic reopening, loosening key parts of the COVID policy in a shift that has been welcomed by a wary public.
It's been 3 years. After all, things haven't been like this for a long time. I think opening up is great, since we're only in our 20s. If these lockdowns continued, that would mean our entire youth would be spent sitting at home.
To some football news now. Mr. Jamal Belmadi, the Algerian national football team manager, expressed his happiness at the honor he received from the People's National Army, as he considered it an honor and a heavy responsibility at the same time to continue to provide his best. Mr. Belmadi, in an interview with Al Jaish Gazette, said there is an emotional relationship that binds him with the National Liberation Front team, stressing that he considers it an important reference in the history of football world, as he defended the Algerian cause during the Glorious Liberation Revolution. On the future prospects of the Algerian football team, Belmadi stressed that Algeria remains the country of football, and no one can say the opposite, as he says, adding that talent is present here. But football needs grassroots work, structuring, organization, supervision, and stability. It was a day of mixed emotions for the South American sporting powerhouses, with Brazil going home and Argentina moving to the semifinals. Both games were decided in penalty shootouts. Let's follow the story with Sofyan Katari.
We believed we could beat Brazil. That's how Croatia manager Zlatko Dalic started his press conference on Sunday morning, after defeating Samba dancers via penalty shootout. Brazil was one of the strongest 2022 World Cup favorites to claim the title, but the former finalists could manage the last minutes of the game and turn it into their side. Brazil is said due to leaving the tournament, but the world cannot forget how many times Brazilian legends won the Golden Trophy and how they came to Qatar to support their succession.
We were certain we were going through because Brazil came prepared, and then this happened. It's disappointing.
Croatia now is facing Argentina in the semi-final. Argentina was the second South American nation standing the FIFA World Cup, but its fate was not similar to its neighboring country. Fans danced and sang as they split out of the Lusail Stadium following their country's victory over the Netherlands on Friday night.
The game was amazing and I really like it until the last minute. I support Argentina. I wish all the best until the next step.
I'm devastated. I think it was nice that we came back, but you know, in the extra time, I think we lost it a little bit, and so we went into penalties, which is already where we have a hard time normally. So too bad, but 4 years, we're gonna win it.
Lionel Messi and his partners has shown their determination to claim the title by starting a preparation session just a day after the game instead of resting. which is not easy, but offering Messi such a gift at the end of his career worth it, and that's due to the joy he brought to the world during his profession with Blaugrana and Argentina.
The Moroccan team beat their Portuguese opponent at the Thumama Stadium in the quarter-finals of the 2022 Qatar World Cup. The confrontation was defined by a single goal by the Moroccan team, which advances to the semi-finals of the World Cup. Morocco will face France in the next fixture. And Olivier Giroud sent France into a World Cup semi-final meeting with Morocco as his late header after Aurélien Tchouameni's opener clinched a 2-1 win against England as Harry Kane blazed a penalty over the bar 6 minutes from time on Saturday. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, our news bulletin draws to a close. For more, you can visit our social media platforms as well as our website. That's it for me, from me and the rest of the team. Thank you for following. Bye for now.